evening, allowing me to present on behalf of the PNG LNG Project. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the project and the associated challenges that we have in bringing the gas from the Highlands to market. First, just a little background about myself. I'm a chemical engineer by degree. I've basically got 15 years of oil and gas experience, and I've been working on the PNG development for just over 6 years now. So quite a little bit of history in PNG with the project. So what does it take to deliver gas from the Highlands to market? What we've done is we've basically gone out to the world. We've brought in major contractors with their own set of skills to allow us to break up the project into little pieces that is manageable by those contractors. So what we've got up here, and it's hard for you guys to see in the back, so I'll just walk through it. We've got basically 8 elements of the project. EPC 1, which is our telecoms infrastructure contractor, which is Transtel. EPC 2, which is our offshore pipeline contractor, which is Saipan. EPC 3, which is the LNG plant, is done by Chiyoda JGC joint venture. The EPC 4 project, which is the Hides gas conditioning plant in the Highlands, is done by the CBI Clough joint venture. EPC 5A is the onshore pipeline and infrastructure, which is done by Speakerpod. And EPC 5B, which is the Como airport, done by McConnell Dow. C1 and C2 are early work contracts. C1 basically is doing all the early works in our upstream area, and C2 is doing our early works for the LNG plant. And we also have our drilling folks by neighbors and supported by other contractors. In saying that, all of the contractors are using Exxon Mobil standards for design, and they're also using our safety standards, quality standards, environmental and social management standards, and are all encompassed by our operations integrity management system as well. So all of those standards that Exxon Mobil has worldwide are put into those contracts, so we have a consistent design that meets our standards, so we have a safe project for delivering gas to market. Okay. This basically shows you a geographic map of where the contractors are relative to their scopes of work. So I'm just going to turn sideways a little bit. Up in the Highlands, we'll start with EPC 1 is basically all over the country. They're putting in towers, etc., fiber optic cable to support our telecommunication system for the project. EPC 2 is installing the offshore pipeline. EPC 3 obviously is building the LNG plant. EPC 4 is building the Hides gas conditioning plant on the well pads in the Highlands. EPC 5A is doing the onshore pipeline. And EPC 5B is building the Como airport. And then C1 is also doing infrastructure throughout the Highlands. C2 is doing early works in the LNG plant area. And drilling is basically drilling our wells in the Hides and Angore area. So in summary, that's where the contractors are geographically. Drilling, just to give you an overview, we've got 16 wells to be drilled over separate campaigns. That includes all of our future campaigns. In the first phase, we're basically drilling 8 new wells in the Hides area and having 2 workovers. And we're also drilling 2 new wells in the Angore development. High capacity rigs that are basically road transportable. So we're going to bring the rigs in through Ley, and then they'll be road transported along the Highlands Highway and up into the Hides area for drilling. Hides gas conditioning plant. This is the EPC 4 scope of work. What does the Hides gas conditioning plant do? The plant is basically designed to condition the gas and the condensate as well. So what does that mean? We basically condition the gas to a 5 degrees C hydrocarbon and water dew point, and we can condition the condensate to a 9.3 RVP. What does that mean? What that means is the gas basically gets from the Highlands to the LNG plant without dropping out any liquids. That's what the intent of this plant is. What does it mean on the condensate side? We move condensate from the plant to the Kutubu, existing Kutubu refinery without forming gas. So basically we need a stable product on the gas and liquid side to get to Kutubu and to the LNG plant for further processing. Okay? The other thing you'll see on this drawing is the number of equipment in the Hides plant. It's a lot more than a usual plant would do, and that's because of our logistics challenges to get the equipment into the Highlands. So what we have is, we'll get into the logistics on the next slide, but let me just give you an idea of the engineering challenges that we're facing in building this plant and well pads. We've got seismic issues. So from an earthquake perspective, obviously the issues that are happening in Japan, we want to avoid here. So we're basically designing the plant to meet seismic conditions that we have in PNG. We also have soil issues. We've got volcanic soils that are up in the Highlands. So we basically have to design all the earthworks, the foundations, etc., to make sure we acknowledge the issues we have with the volcanic soils and design around those. We also have large rainfalls in the Highlands. So the designs have to accommodate storm, water, drainage, etc. And then the logistics issues. I bring up logistics as a big issue because of the constraints we have in getting our equipment up to the Highlands, we have to design our equipment in a way that allows us to transport it up to the Highlands, and we'll get to that in the next slide. So, flip to the next slide. Okay, the northern logistics route. We've got issues on the northern logistics route with regards to size of equipment and the weight that the bridges can allow. So we've basically got a 20-ton limit in essence on the equipment and materials we can bring up the Highlands Highway. So Highlands Highway, we're bringing equipment into Lae, taking it all the way up to the Highlands to build the Hides gas conditioning plant. Now, the bigger equipment, the vessels, the compressors, the generators, if you flip to the next slide, we're building an airport. We're basically building this airport in the Highlands to allow us to land an Antonov to bring in our heavier equipment. So that takes us up to a 70-ton limit on equipment, allowing us to bring in the bigger vessels, compressors, generators, as I mentioned earlier. Como Airport is about a 3.2 kilometer runway. It's going to allow us to land an Antonov airplane in the Highlands, basically allowing us to expand the equipment we can bring in up to 70 tons. Otherwise, the plant would have been much larger in smaller components. So that's why Como's being built. Okay? Onshore and offshore pipelines. These are being done by Speakerpag and Saipem, as I mentioned earlier. We've got 300 kilometers of onshore pipeline, 400 kilometers of offshore pipeline. Many engineering issues associated with pipelines. Onshore, we have the seismic again. We have rough terrain. The terrain getting from all the way from Hides to the landfall to offshore. And I'll show you the terrain on the next slide, actually. But basically, in the offshore, we have the pipe lay issues, all the design that goes into the wall thickness calculations, the laying it over large ravines, etc., goes into how the engineering is done for those elements. So let's go to the next slide. This gives you a feel of the terrain that we're basically, the challenge of terrain on this project. So the Amati landfall is basically where the onshore pipeline ends, and we have our well pads up in the Highlands up there. So basically, the well pads are up at about 2,700 meters elevation. The Hides gas conditioning plant's at 1,700 meters elevation, and then the pipeline has to go from 1,700 meters elevation all the way down to the Amati landfall. So you can imagine the mountainous terrain that we have to traverse to get that pipeline in is a feat in itself, and then the logistics associated with getting that pipeline in is also an issue. So we're managing all those issues with these specific specialized contractors that have the expertise from around the world. Next slide. This gives you a picture of the first stringing of the pipeline. We've actually installed just over 50 kilometers of the onshore pipeline, starting at Amadi, going up. So this gives you an idea of the right-of-way and how we go about putting the pipeline in and welding it in place. LNG plant. Basically, the LNG plant is a 6.6 million tons per annum LNG plant. There's 2 trains there. It's being built by Chiyoda and JGC joint venture, and we're using the APCI technology. There's permanent infrastructure there, 300 beds, there's medical centers, industrial park, etc. The jetty to offload the LNG. What does the LNG plant do? We basically bring conditioned gas from the highlands to the LNG plant. It takes that gas. If you take 600 milliliters of gas, let's take this bottle, make it into minus 160, cool it to minus 160 degrees C, and it forms a liquid. And that liquid, 600 mils of gas, turns into 1 milliliter of liquid. And that's what basically we use to allow us to ship that gas to elsewhere in the world. And we're using that, we'll get to the ships in a second, but we're using that technology to allow us to market the resources of PNG to other markets in the world, China, etc. Okay? Shipping, we're building 2 ships in China, and we're building 4 new tugs that'll basically sit around Kaohsiung Bay. This allows us to get the LNG to market. I'm not going to get, that's about all I know on the LNG plant. I'm more of the upstream side, so the shipping side of it I'm not too familiar with, so I'm going to skip that. Training centers. We're also putting a lot of infrastructure in for the project to allow training to happen in Papua New Guinea. We've built POMTEC, which is going to basically give about 1,000 trainees per year. And we're also built Juni Training Center up in the Highlands, which will produce about 400 trainees over the duration of the project. You're going to get trainees such as mechanical assistants, electrical assistants, machinery operators, general laborers, scaffolders, clerks, etc. that come out of these training facilities that's going to support the project. The training that we're also providing is TAFE certified, and that's important for Papua New Guinea. TAFE certification is basically an Australian standard. It's not just a project standard, so once these laborers have the TAFE certification, they'll be able to market themselves in the Southeast Asia region and not just within Papua New Guinea. Okay? So it's very important that we are putting these training facilities in and getting the local Papua New Guineans trained in order for the future growth of Papua New Guinea. We've had about 500 graduates to date from POMTEC, and we're going to begin classes at Juni at towards the end of this year. So that facility in Juni is still being constructed at the moment. Okay, and then the last slide is the operations trainees. Now, obviously, the POMTEC and Juni are for the construction workers. We also have training going on for the long-term operations for the plants, whether they're in the Highlands or at the LNG plant. So we've got a first class of 75 operations and maintenance trainees that are going into training within the operations organization in Exxon Mobil. The class includes 20 women. Trainees were selected from all across Papua New Guinea, and the training will include overseas training for 12 months at other various affiliate facilities throughout the world. In addition to that, we have recently just put 6 graduate engineers who were sent to Melbourne for 18 months of training for commissioning and startup. They'll basically be used by the project team for the commissioning and startup of the facilities. And we've also got 2 engineers that we've brought into the drilling program, and they'll be used in the Highlands for the drilling program after 18 months of training in Melbourne and Houston. So we're using the Papua New Guinean engineers, trying to get them integrated into our long-term plans and get them trained so we can utilize their skills for our plants and long-term operation. So on that note, I'd like to thank you again for letting Exxon Mobil give you a brief summary on where we are with the LNG project. I want to thank the landowners, the PNG government, i.e. PNG, and everyone here allowing us to develop the resources of PNG and taking it to market. Appreciate the time.